What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. I thought we were going to talk about our recovery.
How is it being in recovery?
It's a lot better than being drunk.
That's true. It's nice to be able to look out on the river.
Yeah. I love this view.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right. This is something I ask all of the patients I see.
Don't see me as a patient.
Why?
Okay, but I'm not your patient.
Maybe
to be
that's
clear.
what we could do.
I'm your wife.
That's what we could do. Is you could be my patient for this.
What you've always wanted.
All right. If I were an alien and I came down from the sky and I said to you, "What is addiction?" What would you say?
What is addiction? Well, I can say that on this side of addiction, which is, almost 18 years since my last substance in my body, it's very different. So I do think recovery from addiction is I know it is a very different experience than active addiction. Active addiction is, I'm trying to think of something really profound and simple, but active addiction is powerlessness. It's like being madly in love with and at the control of drugs and alcohol. Like when you fall in love, you for some people, can be consumed by it and would do
like you were consumed by me.
Yes, just like I was consumed.
Just like it. Okay, it makes sense. Now I understand.
Yeah. I mean, for some people, when they fall in love, initially, that initial love, you do anything for it, you're consumed by it, it's all you think about, and that love and feeling goes with you everywhere. It's like a new experience everywhere you go. You go to work, you're a little giddier, you go shopping, you're a little giddier, you see the world differently. And with addiction, it's much the same way. It's just very dark. But in the end of my drinking, even though I never wanted to stop drinking, I wanted to control it. Like I never could. I never could just have one. And it impacted every aspect of my physical body as well as my spiritual body and mental health.
It's funny when I'm seeing patients or clients, I depending on what they're seeing me for, I will sometimes ask, what is therapy? So I ask that question, or I used to ask, or I do ask that question far more often now than I do the addiction one. But when I was working in treatment, you know who I would always ask that question?
Rashton?
On an interview. When I was interviewing a new therapist.
Oh.
I would always ask that question.
Are you interviewing me for this podcast?
Yes. And you failed.
I didn't get the job.
No, you did.
I thought this was, so you have the upper hand in the podcast?
No, what? I mean, I'm the more experienced and savvy.
Okay. An important aspect of being sober and in recovery is remembering where you came from. John sometimes struggles with this.
That's true.
And humility. And remembering, he wants to speak so badly. Remembering that he doesn't listen. He just can't. He's generating his response rather than listening to me.
It's true. Go ahead. I'm going to listen then.
Yeah, right.
Go ahead.
I think an important aspect of being in recovery is remembering where you came from and that it's only a moment away being thrown back into that life of addiction. And having people who you can confide in and who you look up to, I think, in recovery, and who know everything inside, everything about you, including your darkest thoughts.
That came up yesterday when I got that call about the person who I'm working with who's struggling. And you said that. That's right. Because we forget about it. Like you said, were you 18? Did you say 18 years?
17 and a half.
17 and a half. Yeah, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, but it's also very close.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've heard it said that recovering from alcoholism and drug addiction is like the ability to live 2 lives in 1 lifetime.
Huh.
Because it's true that my life before getting sober the thought of it is very foreign to me, but yet very familiar.
You know how I experience it?
How?
It's like...
I'm sure it's better, however.
No. It's like the person I used to be he's there, but he's quieter and he's subdued, but he's still there. He still says to me sometimes, "Hey, how you doing today?" Right?
Want some Kratom?
Want some crack? Right? Not Kratom. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like you're still... Now, I'm going to need your undivided attention.
I know. I'm putting my phone on Do Not Disturb at ding.
Good grief, the lack of respect.
So you are in charge of this show.
No, but do you feel that way? Do you feel like your addicted self is still there underneath the surface? You just have more, I don't know if control is the right word, but you have a better ability to rein it in, perhaps? Or do you see it differently?
No. I think, my therapist does a lot of parts work with me. So I think it will always be a part of me. And I think that's good. It gives me, I think having recovered from alcoholism and drug addiction, just like I think any huge roadblock in life and being on the other side of it gives me a lot more empathy. Am I always is my first response always empathy and love and tolerance? No, a lot of times it's judgment. But the second and third, when I get right sized as to what an incredible gift I've been given, and how, I could be dead, I could be still out there living that very small life. I have a lot more empathy. And yeah. And
empathy for yourself?
Empathy for others.
Others.
Who are suffering.
Yeah.
Or who are just getting on my nerves, you know?
Yeah. Luckily, that's never me.
Yeah, luckily. Luckily, I'm always the one getting on your nerves.
So you mentioned parts.
Yeah.
What are your parts?
Well, I have a lot of different parts. I mean, I'm not the therapist, but in my work with my therapist, I've learned, there's a part of me that's a child, very childish. There's a part of me who's controlling.
No. I couldn't help it. We'll edit that out. We'll edit that out, honey. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. You're going to open with that.
All right, so there's a part of you that's a child. There's a part of you that's controlling.
There's a part of me who's a mom, and a part of me who's a nurse anesthetist, and a part of me who's a wife and a daughter. There's a part of me that's broken. And there's a part of me that's whole. There's a part of me that's a people pleaser. There's a part of me that's confident in my voice, My therapist is doing a lot of work with me on finding my voice rather than doing what I think everybody else wants me to do. Having less fucks to give, basically.
Yeah. As long as you do what I want.
It's great. Yeah. And I do think so. Yes, it will always be a part of me, but I think that ultimately, I think everything goes back to God, which, you know, this, I'm not being, for me, I don't want to get it, oh gosh. The universe, God, it all goes back to, you know, I believe that we are human beings. What is it? A human body having a spiritual experience. And so I think it all goes back to God. And I think things like addiction and other big roadblocks get in the way of me and the universe and God and what this experience on earth is supposed to really be about. So I think that I don't think I have control over my addiction. I think that I am in the solution to treat it, which to me involves seeking a relationship with God and helping others. You know, trust God, keep clean house, help others. I think that's, and whatever God is, it's different. I think it's different for different people, but I think it's all the same. You know, I don't believe in a God that, I think God is everything. But I don't think I think control is the wrong word, because if I could have controlled it, then I would have just stopped drinking. If I look back at that other life of active addiction, it blows my mind that I don't drink today. Because I couldn't stop, and I couldn't, and I really didn't want to stop. I just wanted to cut back. But I didn't do that.
I always talk about my first interaction with Dr. Fishman, and he told me he had been sober 24 years, and I said, "How often do you drink?" I could, like you said, I couldn't wrap my head around it. But it's interesting, you talked about control, and that's a taboo word for us, right, in certain recovery circles, because control is, you know, I know for like it's funny because in an abstinence-based world, in a 12-step world, you know, control is like the central problem of addiction, lack of control. And in some of the work that I do clinically, that is not okay to tell somebody that they don't have control. Like, having self-determination and the ability to have agency is a huge part of like mental health and well-being. How do you balance those two opposing realities? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, like, I know what agency is.
I know you know what agency is, but those two ideas, that control, you don't have control, but you do have control.
You have choices. I think that agency is being able to choose, you know, the healthier attitudes and actions. But there's, I know what I want to say, I'm just having trouble saying it. To me, and I learned this in a book I read by Father Richard Rohr, and I'm not Catholic, but I love Richard Rohr. He's really helped me. His books have really helped me come to terms with my concept of God and Christianity. And anyway, but he talks about how all of us on the earth have addictions to different things. It's just those of us who are addicted to mood-altering chemicals, our addictions are really loud. You know, we break laws, we hurt people, sometimes we die. It's a really loud addiction, but as humans, we are all in one way or another addicted to work, control, different things. And so I don't think that I really have control over anything in this world except my attitude and my actions. I can't control you. I can't control my kids. I can't control the weather. I can't control my boss. I can't control my patients in the operating room. I really can't. All I can control is how I approach the world with my attitude and my actions. So, you know, now I'm not saying I'm without agency at all. I think that you do need empowerment and agency, but really when it comes down to it, the only thing I can control in my experience is my attitude and my actions. And if you want to argue, I'm not saying you do, but if somebody in the treatment world wants to argue semantics, that's fine. But for me, as someone who has lived the experience of addiction, something shifted in me, and in order to have that shift, I had to surrender, and so, yeah, does that make sense?
It does. It's interesting, when you were sharing, I thought about, maybe, this literally just occurred to me, that maybe control is something to be considered on a continuum, right? Like, I think a lot of times when we think of control, it's an absolute. We think of it absolutely. Like when you were saying, I don't have control of my kids. We don't have absolute control over them, but we do have a lot of control over them. Like maybe what would you say? 30% maybe?
On a good day. They're 4 and 8.
Right? You don't have control over, what did you say, me?
Yeah.
What, maybe 8%?
Work in progress.
Right? Well, no, I'm kidding, but maybe it's a matter of thinking about it on a continuum as opposed to a black and white thing. Because I think when the question was asked, it was set up as this kind of either or, when maybe it's not an either or. Maybe it's, because another thing I thought about is when in the context of 12-step programs is we talk about craving and lack of control often once we ingest a substance, right? Once we ingest a substance, the game is over. We have lost, and we lose that control. Whereas, as you and I sit here today, we have the choice. We have the power to say, I'm going to drink or I'm not going to drink. But
Yes.
then once we drink or use, we lose the power. Would you say that's...
Yes, but I think that for me, I do things on a daily basis that, not perfectly at all, but one day at a time for 17 and a half years, I've engaged in certain actions that I believe keep me in a place of the other side of control on the continuum. I just don't like the word control, and that's probably my, the way I got sober, because but
Influence, maybe? You have influence?
Yeah, okay, so we're just coming off the holidays. Would I love a glass of champagne on New Year's Eve? Sure. Would I love to, be able to have a glass of wine with the girls? Sure. But do I? No. Because at this point, I feel like I'm armed with these tools that help me not pick up a drink.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe if I stop doing the things doing the things that I think help me lead a life of recovery that's closer to what I think God wants me, the life that God wants me to lead. If I stop doing those things, I think I'll drink.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I do think, I'm recovered, but I think that it is contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. I believe that. I believe that we have a daily reprieve.
Yeah. So it's like there's always something pulling us back.
I think that.
Yeah, and if we don't maintain a certain, whatever you want to call it, spiritual condition, well-being,
right,
then it puts us at risk.
Yeah.
Because I think of, it's interesting. So if you were to ask me the question, because you never asked me
Because
what
you
I
don't
think.
let me.
What?
You just keep rapid fire questioning.
That's true. But if you were to
What was
ask,
the question?
what is addiction? If I were an alien.
Oh, we're going back to that question.
That was the question.
What is addiction? A superpower?
Well, that's there's a lot of ways of thinking about it. You remember on the way back from the cruise, we were listening to Atomic Habits
Yes.
for a minute.
Yeah.
And great book, by the way. And he talks about, and he references addiction specifically, in that it's like a supercharged habit, which I see a ton of truth to that. He goes through the different stages of habits, like cue. He calls it a cue, which in recovery we would call it a trigger. Same thing. And then you have the response, which is the craving, right, or the desire.
Sure.
Then you have the I may be getting the words mixed up, but you have the craving, the desire, then you have the response, then you have the reward, right? And so that's addiction.
Right.
I mean, to me, and then it just sets you back up at the beginning.
Right.
This kind of cycle that's so ingrained.
But the reward gets smaller and smaller. I mean,
Yeah.
at least that's my experience.
Well, yeah. I mean, for me, it's about the brain is so remarkable that it adapts. So if I'm pumping my brain with opioids and stimulants and all of the alcohol, my brain is going to kind of make adjustments to either turn up or turn down the volume, which then leads me in a compromised state after the fact where I'm going to want more to reach that effect.
So is that what you think it is, a supercharged habit?
Well, I think that's one way of thinking about it.
Yeah,
I think
no,
there's
I like
many.
it.
I think there's many ways.
Absolutely. I thought you were
about
wanting me to give your...
I think there's many. Well, if so, for me, and you're a clinician too, in a different capacity, more of in the medical side of things, but you can appreciate this from a healthcare perspective. As healthcare providers, we identify symptoms, right? So we identify symptoms, and then our job is to build a treatment plan that will remove the symptoms. Right? Is that
Right,
how
quite.
you see it? As, I mean,
Yeah, remove the disease, treat the disease so there are no symptoms.
Okay. And so from that point of view, we've developed symptoms of the disease of addiction, right? Tolerance, withdrawal, craving,
Consequences.
lack of control, right? Continued use despite negative consequences, impairment, all of that stuff. And so if you have a certain amount of those symptoms present, then you have quote unquote addiction, although addiction is not a clinical term. You would have a substance use disorder.
I thought addiction was...
Yeah, I don't know if it says this in the DSM, but addiction is considered to be severe substance use disorder.
Right. Well, to go back to the control thing, I think the risk for me, if I think I have it under control, is that I think maybe this time it'll be different. You know, like maybe I can just have one. So, you know, I'm not a clinician in the treatment realm where, you know, certain words are poo-pooed. Part of what helped me get sober was looking at some hard truths about myself. Ugly truths, you know? And so you can't, some things I think you can't dance around just to make them feel good about themselves.
Oh, yeah. You water it down.
Can't, yeah.
I agree.
You give them an out.
Right.
you know, and do I agree, you know, do I agree with every aspect of my treatment experience today? No. Am I grateful for my path and where I got sober? Absolutely. Was it perfect? No. But no, nothing is, you know. But it was definitely eating, breathing, sleeping the 12 steps, and, you know, kind of we're going to beat you down to build you up, you know, and it worked. So, and for me, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, you know, but it worked for me.
That's how my brain works. I'm like a squirrel.
Yeah, I know.
So, we have 2 children.
Yeah.
Right? 8 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And both of us are in recovery. Do you ever think about them becoming addicted?
Oh, sure. Especially the younger one.
Oh, yeah. She lied to me.
She lies a lot. She lies a lot.
She looked at me and she's not supposed to watch YouTube. And she keeps asking, can I watch YouTube? Of course, we tell her no. So yesterday she was in her little tent, and I poked my head and I said, what are you doing? She said, I'm watching YouTube. And I said, what? She goes, oh, no, I'm not watching YouTube. She was watching YouTube.
She lies a lot. She really does.
But
way more than Dash ever did.
So does that mean she's going to be addicted?
That's just what you hear, you know. Oh, I lied a lot. But kids lie.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think about our kids? I think I'm a better parent, not drunk, for sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the things that I don't know, I see both sides of the coin. I think one side of the coin is that we are both healthy, in recovery. We're not perfect. But, you know, our kids have a very, very supportive, loving environment, right? In my opinion, they're not, you know, they don't have an active alcoholic parent or an incarcerated parent. They're not being traumatized or neglected. Right. They don't have, you know, we're married, happily married. We don't fight, you know, I mean.
No, we stonewall each other.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but you know, it's not like we're screaming and yelling at each other and you're beating me up or anything. So I think all of that's positive. You look at like adverse childhood experiences and the correlation between those and you know, them having problems in adulthood and increased risk of mental health and substance use. They don't have any adverse childhood experiences up to this point. They don't have any. We're very privileged. We both are very successful. We've had our mental health struggles, but I don't think anything more than what most people struggle with, you know, as far as anxiety and depression and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But then the flip side of that coin is that genetically they are at a higher risk, right, because of our history. And then, you know, I feel like our society and culture, particularly now with the digital era and devices, you know, they are being bombarded with quick dopamine, you know, reinforcement of quick dopamine behaviors, like watching, you know, and we're bad about that. We've got to do better about tablets, both of us. I mean, but it's you know, selfishly, it's easier. Like, you know, yesterday, our daughter was on the tablet. She sits in her tent. She's quiet. She doesn't disturb us.
Yeah.
But then you take her off the tablet, and it's just like she's in your face, and you know. So selfishly, there's that piece to it. But I think that's one aspect of it. And then the they love sweets. They love those sweets, don't they?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, is normal. But, those are things that, like, those two things for me is like, yes, that's normal, but for someone that's at a high risk of a substance use issue, could those things potentially, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's 2025, and we're gonna do better. That's my goal.
Well, I feel like we did pretty good last year. We had a 7 o'clock rule, which we held to most of the time
Until Thanksgiving.
Right? They wouldn't get on a device till 7, which they did. We stopped kids' YouTube. They haven't been on kids' YouTube in a while.
Since yesterday.
Right.
Yeah. I still think there's room for improvement. The weekends is when it's hard.
Right.
But we're
Right.
And we've had a lot of holidays.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of days off from school.
But I tell you what, too, and this is some of my stuff, but and this is where our stories are a little different. You have kind of your stuff, I have my stuff. So, my perspective of my kind of pathological development, if you will, is that I have ADHD as a kid. And in my view, that set me up in a lot of ways for having problems. Not gonna say it caused the problems, but I think it put me at higher risk for addiction, anxiety, depression, sleep problems, that kind of thing. Right. It's not a direct causation, but I think it increased my sensitivity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas for you, yours was, well, don't let me speak for you. Here's what I would say.
Okay, then don't.
I'll say it, and then you say if I'm wrong. You had more of a anxious, compulsive, and then ultimately the eating stuff that I didn't have that experience. But for both of us, those were and still are huge things that we had going back as far as I can remember.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I agree that, like, I think it's nature and nurture, and I hope that, that we continue to do our best to provide our kids with the best, environment possible that, fosters a place where it's okay for them to not be perfect, and it's okay for them to express their emotions, and it's okay, they see, I feel like we do a pretty good job of, not putting our emotions on them and owning when we are wrong.
Yeah.
And letting them see that, like, I mean, I guess because that I struggled and still do struggle a lot with that perfectionism and people pleasing, and a ton of anxiety related to that. So, I think creating an environment where, and I see those tendencies in our oldest, but
Yeah.
creating an environment where it's okay for him to mess up.
Yeah.
I don't know. And trying to create relationships with them where they feel like they can talk to us,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. I try. I don't succeed at this all the time. One of my rules is that if either one of them asks me to play with them, I try to always say yes, even if it's for 5 minutes. I try to do that. And then, but with the you talked about certainly with Dash, he that anxious, compulsive stuff. But I don't think either one of them have ADHD,
Yeah, that's good.
which is good. Which is good. I think they're both very smart and seem to be not overly hyperactive.
No.
Dash in particular, I mean, this kid, when he sat, I mean, granted, he was watching Ninjago.
And playing a game. And
Playing a game, and building these incredibly complex Legos that were just like, oh my god,
Yeah.
this kid is a savant.
yeah.
He's a savant,
Yeah, just like his dad.
just like his dad. What do you say?
So he's just like his dad.
Just like his dad.